Hello, and welcome to the 7th video on our series on the real business cycle model. Now we're going to start talking about the equilibrium of the economy. Now, the first thing we should ask is what to do with all the results we've developed for the behavior of the consumer and the behavior of the firm, as well as the conditions that the government has to satisfy. Well, we know how they make decisions, but we've also determined how they make some decisions taking prices as given. That's going to be the key here, because we now need a way to determine the level of prices. So the way we're going to do that is we need to understand how those prices affect decisions so that then we understand how events or shocks are going to change prices and through them are going to change the decisions of the agents in the economy, that is, of consumers and firms. Now we're going to do that in two steps. First, we're going to obtain the aggregate supply of goods from production. Now, because capital is fixed in the first period, we know that's a given value, then production depends only on labor. So we're going to look at the labor market to determine how much output is produced at some given prices. Then we're going to obtain the aggregate demand for goods. Now, demand comes from consumption, investment, and from the government in the form of government expenditure. So we're going to go over how to get aggregate demand out of the decisions of consumers and firms and the variables that the government has. Now, before that, we need to make clear what an equilibrium is. And this is something that is often overlooked in some courses and something I really want to stress as being important. Because the equilibrium is not some abstract concept, it's not something immaterial. In fact, it is just the name we give to the set of choices that people make. Equilibrium is the word we give for what people are doing in the economy. So an equilibrium is something palpable. It's the set or list of what people do. To be precise, it's going to be a value for consumption, a value for the labor supply, a value for investment, a value for prices. That list of values is an equilibrium. Now, not any values can become an equilibrium. The key for a set of values of consumption, labor, investment, etc. to be an equilibrium is that people's choices must be optimal and markets have to clear. So they have to be consistent with the decision-making process of individuals and consistent with market clearing. Let us now define an equilibrium for the economy that we're working with. An equilibrium is a set of variables. Note that here I'm listing all the variables in the economy that somebody is choosing. Consumption today and tomorrow, leisure today and tomorrow, the savings of the consumer, labor demand today and tomorrow, investment and capital tomorrow, the profits, output, taxes, government debt. An equilibrium is not only that set of variables, but also a set of prices. We have three prices in this economy: wages today and tomorrow, and the interest rate that prices intertemporally consumption today versus consumption tomorrow. And these variables are not the only ones. We always have to take into account which variables are taken as given. In this economy, we take as given the present value of capital, nobody's choosing it. Government expenditure, nobody's choosing it. And then the values of Z and Z prime, that is going to be TFP or productivity. Then we need to go through the optimization conditions of each of our agents. So the values chosen by the consumer need to maximize its utility given the prices and other values they are not choosing, in this case taxes and profits. Then the values of N prime, and investment solve the profit maximization problem of the firm given again prices and the variables they take as given. They don't choose capital, they don't choose their productivity. Now, given that solution, we also know that K prime, listed here, has to satisfy the capital accumulation equation. Output is just defined by the production function, and profits must satisfy their definition. Then the values of taxes and government debt must satisfy the government budget constraints, taken as given the interest, which is a price taken as given by the government, and the level of government expenditure, which is taken as exogenous. Finally, the prices are to be such that markets clear. So we need to clear the market for present labor. This is labor demand. H minus leisure. This is labor supply. The market for future labor. And the savings market. Actually, in this economy, because it's a closed economy, the only way consumers can save is by lending to the government. So every unit of savings of the consumer has to be matched 1-for-1 with 1 unit of debt. And then if the consumers want to borrow, the only place they can borrow from is the government. So if S is negative, B has to be negative, and the government has to be saving. So I want you to study this slide carefully, because for almost every model we're going to cover, we're going to have to define what an equilibrium is. And this is not something that's obscure. You should take these as an exercise to know which variables you have to find out to solve for the equilibrium. Solving for the equilibrium amounts to finding the values of all the variables listed here, taken as given the exogenous variables of the model. The way you know if this is correct, you need to find out if in each of the problems you are actually solving for each of the variables in the list. You need to have an equation that determines each of these variables. And then the variables that are undefined, they better be taken as given. They better be exogenous. Okay, with this we finish the preamble to find the equilibrium of the model. In the next 2 videos, we're going to tackle finding the aggregate supply and finding the aggregate demand. Thanks.